Hello and welcome to another painting video from GMP Miniatures. This time I'm doing a quick walkthrough of how I painted Maria from Anima Tactics. So first up, I'm using a white primer from Vallejo and I'm base coating the whole model with the airbrush. A can based primer would do the same job just as well. Next up, I'm moving on to some base coating. So I'm base coating the whole kind of Grim Reaper part of the model in Vallejo black, and I'm just watered this down and I'm giving the whole cloak a good coat. The next base coat involves Maria herself, so for this I'm using Citadel Xereus purple, and I'm just base coating her cloak and any of her clothing other than her legs with this colour. I've left the legs and I'm base coating them with Vallejo German Grey. All of Maria's skin, like her face and on her legs and hands, is base coated with Cadian Fleshtone. And moving on to her hair, that's base coated with Citadel's Mornfang Brown. All of the metal on the model, that includes the Reaper's scythe and there's some crosses in Maria's hands, those are base coated with Vallejo Gunmetal. I actually missed this skull, so I'm moving back to it and base coating it in Cadian Fleshtone. And next to the skull there seems to be some sort of timer, like a sand timer, so I'm using Vallejo Shadow Grey to base coat the glass on that little timer. So now all the base coats are out of the way, move on to some washes. So I'm using Vallejo Black Ink and I'm coating all of Maria, all the metal areas, but I actually leave behind the Reaper's black cloak because there's no point in using the black ink on that yet. So it's just all the metal areas and all of Maria with this black ink. So next I'm starting to move on to the cloak and I'm trying to get some new colours and definition in the cloak, so it's not just black. Because black's quite a hard colour to paint with, it's quite difficult to highlight. So what I'm doing here is, I'm just kind of blending in some German Grey from Vallejo, blended into lighter areas of where the cloak would be standing out more. So around the bottom, on the knees, any part of the cloak that's sticking out, give it a little highlight with German Grey from Vallejo, and I do it through an airbrush. So next up I'm doing some layering. I'm using Ratskin flesh from Citadel and I'm just layering over all the flesh areas. This might take two thin coats just to get a good coverage from that last a lot darker colour. I do this on all the skin, on the face, on the legs. And then I go ahead and highlight the skin with Skeleton Bone from Army Painter. Going for quite a heavy highlight here because Maria's skin tone's quite bright. So over the face area, I hit it quite heavily, leaving very little of the Ratskin flesh behind. Ratskin flesh was mainly just a medium tone, so it wasn't such a dark to such a light tone. Got that Ratskin flesh to act as kind of help to put down this lighter tone. So next up, I'm going with Xereus Purple again on Maria's jacket. And I'm basically just hitting all the higher areas. I'm coating them with the colour, leaving behind the darker colour in all the recess areas to give an idea of depth. And we will come back to this later and we'll give it an even sharper highlight on those very lightest parts. But this is just kind of a mid colour for the cloak. So now we can move back to the washing stage. Now that there's some grey on the Grim Reaper, I'm going to go ahead and use the Vallejo black ink again. I'm going to coat the whole Grim Reaper's cloak, basically the bits that we didn't catch before with the wash. And this ties in the German grey and the black quite nicely, remove that stark contrast. And then I'm going to go ahead and start highlighting the metal areas. So this is on the Reaper's scythe, on Maria's crosses. I'm just picking out the sharp highlights of the blade and all the details on the blades with Vallejo gunmetal. Like before, I'm using Ratskin flesh as a medium colour. To put the skeleton bone straight over onto this skull here, it would take many layers and it would be quite difficult to do to make it look good. So first I'm using the Ratskin flesh, and then I come in with the skeleton bone, and this goes on much easier once the Ratskin flesh has been put down, but it might actually take 2 layers of the Ratskin flesh before you can get a nice smooth coat. So for the timepiece here, I'm going back with Shadow Grey and I'm highlighting the glass. And then to make the glass look a bit more realistic, I go in with an even lighter colour Fenrisian Grey and highlight those very stark areas. So I'm using a mix of paints here for this highlight. It's half Citadel Xereus Purple and half of Vallejo's Foundation White. Basically just mixed a bit of white into the purple and we get a nice highlighting colour here. So I'm just picking out all the very edges, edge highlighting those just to make them stand out a bit more. So for the hair, I'm going to highlight this with some more Mournfang Brown. Once the hair's had a wash, this creates a nice smooth contrast between the colours. It's not too bright. But we will start to highlight the end of the hair, give the hair some nice highlights by mixing some of that Mournfang Brown with some Ushabti Bone from Citadel, so it's 1:1, 50-50, and then we're going to highlight some of the hairs, some of the ends of the hairs with this new lighter colour. Now we're going to move straight back over to the Reaper, now that that wash is dry, and I'm using German Grey again here from Vallejo. It's kind of like a go-to grey colour for me. It's nice for highlighting kind of black areas or very dark areas. So I'm using this and I'm just going over the creases in the cloak, giving them kind of a thick highlight, not an edge highlight, slightly thicker than an edge highlight, because we will come back and we're going to do an actual edge highlight with a lighter grey colour. That lighter grey colour is 50% German Grey and 50% Cold Grey, both colours are from Vallejo. And I'm just actually doing an edge highlight now of this colour and picking out all the very highest, lightest areas. As I was saying before, black's kind of a hard colour to work with, so I've went for a very dark grey for this Reaper. There is a lot of black in the recesses, but it's very hard to work with black, very hard to highlight and get a nice smooth gradient in the colour. So I've went for kind of a grey look here. So next step will involve the base. So I'm just base coating all this in German grey again from Vallejo. Put a lot of water in this paint for a number of reasons. For a start, it's kind of a waste of paint on a big base, so I just put plenty of water in that to give it a good base coat. Now once that's dry, I'm using cold grey from Vallejo. I'm just giving this a nice little dry brush over the areas I want to be lighter. Creates texture. And now we're coming in with Stonewall grey, which is a slightly lighter grey from Vallejo. And we're going over the very highest areas, we're going to highlight them, make it look slightly more realistic. And then once this is done, the only thing left to do is the rim of the base. So this is just Vallejo black, a little bit of water in this, and it gives good coverage all the way around the rim. So the last step of this model, which I do on pretty much all the models I paint, is to give it a matte varnish from Vallejo. Do this through an airbrush and it just protects the paint, makes the model last longer. It's just great practice to do for all your models. And here's a look at the finished model in a 360-degree view. Quite happy with how it came out. I'm glad I went for the grey on the Grim Reaper because black's a very difficult colour for me to work with. I find it hard. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it could be helpful for you if you're painting this model, and thanks for watching.